Please introduce yourself.
My name is Christopher Briney. I'm the director of the Center for Iyengar Yoga. We're an Iyengar yoga studio located in Royal Oak, Michigan. I am also a certified Iyengar yoga teacher, certified at the intermediate junior 3 level, which is now known as level 3, and that's level 3 of 4 levels. I've been a student of yoga since 1997 and a student of Iyengar yoga in particular since 2001.
Why Iyengar yoga, Christopher?
Well, before I go into that, that's a pretty involved question, I think. For me, why Iyengar yoga is, at some point I came to yoga being raised in a, Midwestern suburb. I hadn't encountered much of Eastern practice or philosophy, and initially it looked to me like, oh, yoga's this thing we do, we bend and twist our body in all these exotic ways, and if you're really strong and superhumanly flexible, you're good at yoga. And for me anyways, I got much stronger and more flexible initially in my practice pretty quickly. But I also recognized there were still disturbances and a sense of some dis-ease in me. And the more I practiced, the more I started to wonder, I wonder if there's something about my practice or something I can do in my practice that would take me to more, and is there more, and what is that more? And the more I sought, I feel I found in Iyengar yoga. To me, I wanted to find a very sure guide in this practice because of its potency, and in some ways its, I don't want to say mysteriousness, but it takes a lot of discernment to practice. So recognizing I didn't have the best map or compass, I wanted to go to find someone who did. And to me, a man who spent most of his life, over 80 years, studying, practicing in depth in the subject, was where I wanted to look. And as I have explored Iyengar yoga more and more, I'm just amazed, even 20 some years later, I'm still making discoveries out of the body of knowledge that is Iyengar yoga. There are still aspects of it that I haven't even explored that I'm still discovering, that are brought to me by senior teachers in the method, Iyengar's son who still lives. So the depth and the insight and the intelligence of it, as well as the commitment to practice and study that's behind the teachers of the method, really spoke to me. So that's for me personally why Iyengar yoga, and why the Center for Iyengar yoga really is, as I looked just in my own practice, it's what I've studied, and it's what not only have I benefited from, but there's just such a cherishing of it, for namely what I mentioned before, the work and the work ethic and the level of depth of thought and attention that's gone into the teachings really spoke to me. And it's vastly underrepresented in our community, in the Metro Detroit region, in my opinion, in particular, but also around the world. In some ways, it seems like I just really wanted to make these teachings available, and in doing so, support my own continued study. But I think there's just such a value, and I felt like if only people knew what was available, and really out of that desire, because honestly, when I started, there was one yoga studio in town. Now there are countless studios in the Metro Detroit area. But to me, to represent this style of yoga seemed really important. So that's why the Center for Iyengar Yoga.
You mentioned that you are continuing to study, and can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing is as certified Iyengar yoga teachers, first of all, it took, when I certified, the standards have changed a little bit in the last 5 years really. When I started, we had to have basically at least 5 years of regular study before we could even begin the process of going towards certification as a teacher. So it was 3 years of study and then 2 years of apprenticeship before we were eligible to apply to be assessed and then certified. So that instilled in me a kind of habit of studying, but more than that, I said earlier that there's just so much knowledge for anything from how can you do yoga to help with your arthritis or inflammatory bowel disease, or there are teachings and methodologies for if you've had cancer, if you've had heart surgery, if you're a cardiac patient, if you have liver trouble, if you have addiction trouble, if you have psychological troubles. The Iyengar family and teachers have really spent a lot of time seeing how do we address the maladies that afflict a human being. So that's one side of it. But on the other side, yoga is a subject whereby one can eradicate one's own ignorance about the nature of life, where it's said that yoga's aim is the liberation from suffering in this life. And there's a real in-depth science behind that. Volumes and volumes of teachings, insights, philosophy regarding how one conducts oneself, conducts one's life, conducts one's affairs to minimize their afflictions, to become fully flowered as a human being, to realize all that's possible for a human being. So it's sort of like you could spend a lifetime in the ocean and still be exploring the ocean. So just an awareness of that, honestly, has kept me studying, because I want to grow, and there's a lot that I feel I can discover that will aid my own experience of life in a variety of ways, professionally, personally, relationally, as a parent. And it's usually never an issue, but we're required as certified Iyengar teachers to have continuing education. So 30 classroom hours a year are mandatory to maintain our certification. That's really not a challenge, because I want to attend classes. And most recently, one of the beauties of the pandemic, if there was one, is that we've had more Zoom classes. So originally, to study with Prashant Iyengar, who's BKS Iyengar's son, I had to travel to India. But now I have the good fortune every week, I could even do it multiple times per week, but at least once a week I take his class, which is held via Zoom, and he's teaching from India. So I'm very much compelled by his teachings, and he's the sort of last remaining member of the immediate Iyengar family still alive and teaching, so I really want to be with him as much as I can and imbibe as much knowledge as I can. So there's fascination. Professionally, I have an obligation to it, and there's my own seeking that keeps me still studying.
What age of student should consider Iyengar yoga?
The way I would say it is, if you're between 8 and 108, we can definitely work with you. I can definitely work with you. Past 108, I would have to maybe consult my mentors, but really formal, anything kind of formal practice for a child, even if they're interested before, they can play with yoga, but there's really no structure to it. Even at 8, there's very minimal structure. It's a lot of jumping and movement and just exciting body positions and ways of keeping them engaged. and helping them channel. Children are full of vitality and kinetic energy, so it's a great way to channel that. But really, we used to have a pamphlet, we may or may not have it anymore, that said like, no one's too old, too young, too stiff, too fat, too thin to practice yoga. And that's another feature, I think, of the Iyengar method is, I would say a certified Iyengar yoga teacher can teach just about anybody, because we know how to pace the class and also modify the postures to fit each individual's needs. So people that are very stiff, we give them props where they don't have to reach as far to get into the pose, so they don't have to battle their stiffness quite so much, and they can regulate that. People who are really mobile, we actually have ways of protecting them and training them to fire their muscles more. People that are older, we'll change the pacing. I mentioned for youth in a class, say for anybody under 14, 15, 16, we almost don't ever stop moving. But I have a teacher, a student who's in her 80s, and sometimes in a 90-minute class we'll do just 5 or 6 postures. We might repeat them, but they're held for a long time. Takes a little longer to get into them. But the point is, if you can attend to your body, attend to your breath, and be reflective, thoughtful in how you are using that body and breath, you can practice yoga.
Why are your classes 90 minutes?
Couple reasons. One is my classes are really like a classroom, so it's not so much a practice. You do some things that are practical, but I'm not really just having people come in and taking them through a routine. So the 90 minutes allows for us to work kind of preparing the body and mind for whatever the focus of the class may be. Could be standing poses, seated poses, back bending poses, forward bending poses. So it allows us to prepare and then to work on some subject, to explore it, to learn some things, to improve our technique or deepen our insights, and then also to kind of neutralize that process, come back, whether, say, if we're doing back bends, we can release the back and settle the kind of excitement that those bring. So that process can be done most thoroughly, and I think the teaching, we can go into it in a certain depth. I've tried hour-long classes, hour and 15-minute classes are okay, but they just limit the depth to which we can go. And then esoterically, there's a little more significant reason, and this is something anybody can do. If you were to put your finger below your nose and feel the breath coming out of your nostrils, you'll find it's coming more out of one side than the other. And that relates to this kind of inner biological, biochemical process, energetic process of what kind of, I guess you could say, energies are dominant in the body. So there's some yoga philosophy behind it, but we have more active energies and more passive energies. And depending on what nostril, that side of the nervous system, so to speak, is more active. And it switches about every 45 minutes. So we're assured that in a 90-minute class, you're going to be on both sides for about an equal length of time. In an hour-long class, you might be more dominant on one side for the 45 minutes and then only have a little bit on the other side. So the 90 minutes ensures a full cycle of this natural biorhythm, which kind of impacts the effects of the practice, how the body participates, how the mind participates, but also what you're receiving. So traditionally, my understanding is classes were at least 90 minutes. So that's another reason.
So you offer drop-in classes, but you also offer sessions. What's the benefit of joining up for an entire session, and how long are the sessions?
Well, first I should say, if the practice is taught well, there's a benefit to any class. But it's kind of like, I don't know, you could have a really healthy meal once a month. and the rest of the time you're not eating well. Which is not to say it's not the exact same thing, but that healthy meal done repeatedly is going to have more effects in the long run. I'll go to how long a session is. It's usually somewhere between 10 and 14 weeks. We pretty much follow the seasons, but with like certain holidays or sometimes a break, usually it's around 12 weeks. And for me, why I teach it, again, that's a kind of unique feature of Iyengar yoga, is we use certain props. We set up the poses in a certain way. So if you know those setups or you know certain fundamentals, we can build on those week by week. Like even just standing up on both feet or even sitting in a position like this, there are certain considerations. Sometimes people sit like this. Sometimes one shoulder is lower than the other. Sometimes people sit like this. There's a way of optimizing the approach to that so that from that foundation you can build a lot. So the session allows us to build the foundation well and then build a lot on top of that. Whereas if it's a new group every time, if it was all drop-ins, for some people have the foundation and some structure built in their yoga knowledge. Other people have no foundation. So we often have to tear down the foundation, rebuild it if it's just drop-ins. But with the session, you can build on the knowledge week to week and really deepen your understanding, which for me, the aim is that you can practice on your own, that my students are able to take the knowledge, really even from week 1, but at least week 3 or 4, they can take their knowledge and start doing something on their own. Could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but that 5 or 10 minutes done 3 or 4 times a week, I've just seen really has effects. People's well-being, but also how they walk through their life gets enhanced. So that's, I would say, the 2 main things about sessions. Continuity of knowledge and starting to have things repeated enough that you can take it, my students can take it and do it on their own.
So someone's watching this for the first time, they've never heard of Iyengar yoga, they're not a yoga student, what would you say to them?
One would be, if you're interested in yoga, maybe it's Iyengar yoga that works for you, maybe not. It's awkward to say. Iyengar himself said there's no such thing as Iyengar yoga. He said of his teachers, you gave it that name to distinguish something. But to him, it was he was looking for what's the essence of yoga, and how do I transmit that essence through particularly postural work and breath work, through the yoga postures and through breathing. So I don't want you to get caught up like there's this type of yoga or that type of yoga. Honestly, if it's grounded in a certain understanding of the process of yoga, the philosophy of yoga, and the methodology, it's yoga. So I would say if you're interested, really educate yourself on maybe the teachings that are available to you. So I would do some research, find out who is BKS Iyengar. If there's another method you're interested in, what's the origin? What's the purpose of it? And do you feel that origin speaks to you? Would you feel safe? Would you feel confident that you're going to get value from that origin, from that source? Do you feel confident that you're aligned with its purpose? And so I would really find that out about the method that you take on, if method matters to you. The other piece I would say is just really inquire about your teacher if it matters. For some people, it honestly doesn't matter. You want to get a certain exercise or workout or fulfill your time in a certain way. That's fine. If that's your thing, definitely go for that. But if you want to learn in a certain way, then I would also find out about your teacher. And whatever it is that matters to you, it could be their philosophy, it could be their hobbies, it could be their training. It could be their own set of values that have them be a yoga teacher. But see, what is it that matters to me? What are my objectives? And try to find a method that you feel confident is going to help you meet those objectives. Hopefully that answers your question.
Is there anything else you want to say about your teachings or the Center for Iyengar Yoga?
I do want to say a couple things about the Center for Iyengar Yoga. So this is I envisioned a place like this that would be able to offer really not all of them, but many of the aspects of Iyengar Yoga. So you can see these ropes here. There's a certain way that the studio is equipped to be able to facilitate experiences and learnings in a variety of dimensions. So that was one thing. This way it's built, the way even the sticky mats we have, the straps we use, the bolsters we use, that's been carefully selected because I know the type of work that I'm aiming to impart and the type of experience that I'm aiming to impart. And to some extent, the facility needs to support that. The other thing I'm just proud of to say, I did much of the work, lion's share of the work of building the place out, the manual work of it myself, which was fun in some way because I like that kind of work, but it allowed me to also curate what's in here. So like the plywood has a green certification, meaning it doesn't have any toxic glues or chemicals. The wood was sustainably harvested. All the paint is zero VOC, very pure paint. Any of the glues we used, even the mud we used for drywall has something called Green Guard certification. And also I worked with local artisans to make some of the fixtures, not these lower hooks, but the upper hooks. There's a metalsmith in town that we contracted in order to support the regional economy. Some of our equipment is from a company in Ann Arbor. So that really that process allowed for something with a larger purpose and a larger commitment to come together. And I guess just about me as a teacher, I don't have all the answers. I'm a seeker on my best days, and I want to be a seeker. So I'm in the process of discovery. I don't pretend to know it all. I hope I never do, either know it all or pretend. Well, knowing it all might be nice because that's enlightenment, but anyway. So what I'm trying to say, somebody asked me recently, what's the experience you want people to have of you, or what's the sense of you that you would want people to have of you or the place? And I would say it's a couple things. One, there's no yardstick you have to measure up to begin or to be here. You don't have to live a certain way. You don't have to eat a certain way. You don't have to think a certain way. There's a certain willingness that's needed to be able to explore and to be able to do this work, but you don't have to be a yogified person, whatever that may be. That's one thing. So really to come as you are. And the second piece is my aim is to meet you where you are. So if you're here to fix your knee problem or your back problem, there's something in this method that will be of value to you, that fixing your knee or back problem ought to enhance your life. And if you want to find out what are the components of consciousness and what are actions you can take or processes you can undergo to harmonize those components of consciousness, I'm totally happy to be shoulder to shoulder with you in that discovery as well. My hope is that you'll come for whatever you come for, and then stay for the flowering of yourself that you're experiencing, the bettering of yourself that you experience. If I do my job well, that will happen for me, and that will happen for you.